learns whither through the unknown he sails, or what secret mission the Great Mother gave in the hidden strength of her omnipotent will, driven by her breath across life's tossing deep, through sunburst roar and through the windless hush, through fog and mist, where nothing more is seen. He carries her sealed orders in his breast. Late will he know, opening the mystic script, whether to blank port in the unseen he goes, or armed with her fiat to discover a new mind and body in the city of God, and enshrine the immortal in his glorious house, and make the finite one with infinity. A power is on him from her rocket force that ties him to his own creation's fate, and never can the mighty traveler rest, and never can the mystic voyage cease, till the nascent dusk is lifted from man's soul, and the morns of God have overtaken his night.
At that time, and we were shown that his spiritual realization was an integral one. He realized the silent, immobile spirit underlying all things. But he also realized the dynamic power of the divine that drives all forces in the universe. In this canto, we're given a more detailed look at this knowledge that Aswapati has gained, the nature of this spiritual realization of the integral divine, these two sides of it. And here they're presented as two aspects of the divine, the soul and nature. And often in this canto, it's referred to as he and she. He, the soul, the silent spirit, and she, the nature, the power of the divine that has created all of this. But he, the spirit, takes birth in this world, in this nature, and experiences all the variety that it presents to his soul, to his experience. So we're getting a view of that and this relation between these two aspects of the divine, the soul and the nature, and their play through the course of evolution. So we've come to page 65, line 701. And Zach, perhaps you would like to begin.
At last, he wakes to a memory of self. He sees within the face of the deity. The Godhead breaks out through the human mold. Her highest heights, she unmasks and is his mate. Till then, he is a plaything in her game, her seeming region, yet her fanciest toy, a living robot moved by her energy springs. He acts as in the movements of a dream, an automaton stepping in the grooves of fate. He stumbles on, driven by her whip of force. His thought labors, a bullock in time's fields. His will, thinks his own, is shaped in her forge. Obedient to world nature's dumb control, driven by his own formidable power, his chosen partner in a titan game. Her will, he has made the master of his fate. Her whim, the dispenser of his pleasure and pain. He has sold himself into her regal power for any blow or boon that she may choose. Even in what is suffering to our sense, he feels the sweetness of her mastering touch. In all experience meets her blissful hands. On his heart, he bears the happiness of her tread and the surprise of her arrival's joy. In each event and every moment's chance. All she can do is marvelous in his sight. He revels in her, a swimmer in her sea, a tireless amateur of her world delight. He rejoices in her every thought and act, and gives consent to all that she can wish. Whatever she desires, he wills to be. The Spirit, the innumerable One. He has left behind his lone eternity. He is an endless birth in endless time, her finite multitude in an infinite space.
Thank you. This is, oh,
So, the first line, at last he wakes to memory of self. It is something like a self-reflection of what, how you say, how the process was, and like when we go inside in our knowledge and reflect what has been done, what has been happening here. So in a way, at last he makes a memory of self. It seems he reflects on all the steps and processes.
this is a continuation of what we had been reading last week. Last week, we talked about this stage of the mind in which the mind begins to try to master nature, to gain control over nature. So he's kind of taken us through a little bit of the course of evolution. And last time he was going through this stage of the mind, where the mind and the reason tries to understand nature's laws, tries to get some control over nature. Now this is also the soul that has taken birth within nature, is attempting to gain some control. So at this point where we begin, we see that the soul has arrived at a point in its evolution where it begins to look within, back, and realize its own self, kind of as something distinct from nature. To look on nature as objectively, and begins then to look within to its own self. And then, he says, at that time, he sees within the face of deity, and the Godhead breaks out through the human mold. Her highest heights, this is nature, her highest heights she unmasks and is his mate. So at that point, she joins with him. He becomes conscious of himself and conscious of her. this is that integral realization comes. But up until that point, he's still just a kind of a plaything of nature. She drives him. He has no control really over what he does in his existence, in his life. All that he does is under her control. So he's like a living robot, moved by her energy springs.
The machinery of nature, like a machine.
We try to sit within, quietly in meditation, to realize that quiet, still self-observing. But all the while, this machine of the mind keeps going, and it's very difficult to shut that down, to control that. It's pressing, the impulses are coming to get up and go get something to eat or to do this or that. Always the nature is pushing us and moving us.
So we understand now that nature does not just include the mind. It is what we call the triple world, the mind, the life force, and the physical.
Correct. So we move, stumbling on, driven by her whip of force. And even the thought is laboring like a bullock in time's fields. And even his will, that he thinks his own, is shaped in her forge. Even our mental will is a part of nature. So the soul is driven by nature until he has that realization of the self. But he is driven by his own formidable power. That power of nature is the soul's power. Ultimately, she is serving him.
And I think it's because world nature in the line before is written with big letters. So it's not the higher world nature who is driven by the divine or the higher process.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be her, driven by her formidable power, his chosen partner in the fighting game. I'm a bit confused here.
He makes it quite clear, his own formidable power.
Let's go to the context. His will, he thinks his own, is shaped by his own forge, obedient to world nature's dumb control. He's still talking of his being under the control of nature. Driven and obedient to world nature's dumb control, driven by his is suddenly an flow is different from the flow. That's why I'm saying if it would have been her, it would have been in the flow. Yeah. That's why I'm a bit confused.
But if we look at the lines that follow, he's explaining.
Which line?
In the lines that follow, that one.
Yeah.
His chosen partner in a Titan game, her will, he has made the master of his fate.
The same sequence, no? It's her everything. Once he has gone into
No, but he's saying she is serving him. Nature is ultimately serving the soul.
But when he is in the flow of nature,
then he's under her control. But ultimately he's given her that control.
So it is their love, basically.
So it's the play between them. He's surrendered to her. Okay, you do with me what you like. I'll follow you. I'll enjoy all your delights, all your difficulties, all whatever you can give to me, I'll follow, I'll enjoy, I'll surrender to you.
Can we? Yes, sir.
7:1, it says at last he wakes to a memory of self. So nature is under control and he lives consent to the nature until he wakes to a memory of
What
self.
I was meaning is that he's talking of, in his entire paragraph, he's talking about his being under her control. Once he has gone into her play, he surrendered to him, her.
Yeah.
That's why I thought his.
But, yeah.
Yeah, ultimately we know.
Well, okay, but when he says his own formidable power, he's referring to that ultimately she is his power.
I think we go back to the two who are one.
Correct.
That is ultimate, that is the last thing.
But
all the arguments we can say that they are together.
But he's referring to that here, no? Otherwise it would be her formidable power, but it's his.
You cannot separate the transcendent to the cosmic, no?
We all know that. What I am saying in this literature, this part of the text, he is referring to her, his being under her control, basically. He's doing whatever she is doing, nature, Mother Nature is doing. So in this context, I'm just saying, his is a contrast, suddenly. And
Yes, it is a contrast.
Same flow goes on that she's a master in the game till now. So that's what I meant.
Okay.
I sometimes get something to really break our minds if we one over the other. That is always an interaction, and not only on a higher level, in daily life. And I think when you watch yourself, then you think also your thought system, and then how is the energy then? How that is always an interaction of the play together. If I'm, how to say, angry, then I feel other energies in me, and then I try to control it and try to change it. So that is always a back and forth and going. I think it's more this process to become more aware and how our thinking and our energy are always interacting with each other.
The play, no? The play.
Yeah, even in myself.
Yeah, that could be, that's always going on, we all know that.
No, we don't know this.
No, most of us here know that. Not all human beings, but we are evolved enough to know this.
But because all this
We are talking
discussion
of
is
literature as
happening,
a poem and just referring to this point.
that's why we are
Maybe that's
trying
what I was
to.
confused because it's different from the flow. But let's go ahead.
Yes.
Enough.
Yeah, he's bringing in just that ultimate relation here. So he has sold himself into her regal power for any blow or boon that she may choose. He's given up himself, his control to her. And he's done it consciously, in a sense, for a reason, because he feels the sweetness of her mastering touch. In all these experiences, he meets her blissful hands. All she can do is marvelous in his sight. He revels in her, a swimmer in her sea. Whatever she desires, he wills to be. And why? Those last lines explain. The Spirit, the innumerable one, he has left behind his lone eternity. Now he is in endless birth, in endless time. Her finite's multitude in an infinite space. So we can continue from there. Would you like to? Oh, I'm sorry.
It is a line 719 for any flow of being that we shall choose. And it comes to me that Sri Aurobindo wrote a poem about Krishna, about the Supreme Lord, Supreme Divine, uh, whatever though the Supreme will choose, if it's pain or it's suffering or darkness, he will accept it as a given thing to live. Something like this. So. And I think that's also the understanding when we read about Mother Sri Aurobindo or the communication and relation from there to the Supreme. It is always this how you say, to surrender to what is there and try to still to be open to the divine.
Okay.
The master of existence lurks in us and plays at hide and seek with his own force. In nature's instrument loiters, secret God, the immanent lives in man and in his house. He has made the universe his pastime's field, a vast gymnasium of his works of might. All knowing, he accepts our darkened state. Divine wears shapes of animal or man. Eternal, he ascends to fate and time. Immortal, various with mortality. The all conscious ventured into ignorance. The all blissful both to be insensible, incarnate in a world of strife and pain. He puts on joy and sorrow like a robe, and drinks experience like a strengthening wine. He vows transcendence roots the pregnant vast. President now dwells in our subliminal depths, a luminous individual power alone.
Thank you. Sometimes Sri Aurobindo refers to this he as the soul, but here he's identifying him with God, with the master of existence. So that is ultimately the soul. It's he, it's the divine. Master of existence lurks in us, playing at hide and seek with his own force. In nature's instrument loiters secret God.
The second line is the most interesting. And plays at hide and seek with his own force. Because usually humans become very serious about life. You can't even see them smile. But here it's a play, it's a game, it's fantastic. No?
Loiter means to walk slowly.
Yeah, to loiter is to kind of hang around.
Go around here and there without any purpose.
No loitering, no?
Yeah, like they have no loitering, and like you can't just stand out on the street and just be talking and doing nothing. Because the police will come and chase you away. Because you might get into trouble or whatever.
So God is loitering.
Yeah, he's kind of loitering within us. He's there, just standing around.
In the last book, it is written, lingered aimlessly. Was good idea about
As if. And immanent, specifically, what does it mean?
To dwell inside.
Immanent, no?
Immanent. Yeah, it's often referred to as the divine within things, within beings.
Yes, that's why it's in capital.
Right.
It's always there, no?
The divine is within, without, everywhere.
Yeah, basically saying he's everywhere. Whether you feel presence or not, he's everywhere. That's what he wants to say, loitering and everywhere.
Yes.
And same sense.
Beautiful.
He's present everywhere.
And he has some nice images here of the nature, the outside world. He has made the universe his pastimes field, a vast gymnasium of his works of might. And then the soul enters into nature. He takes all these various shapes of animals or people, lives through their lives. Although immortal, he dallies with mortality. He experiences the mortal life. All conscious, he ventures into the ignorance. All blissful, born to be insensible, like matter is completely void of sense.
Yeah, and also I think it's interesting to see he has made the universe his pastimes field. It is not expressed at his work. Also, it is.
Yeah.
I don't. Something he's enjoying or playing this or something.
That's it.
Yeah, he's enjoying and playing.
Take it serious. I don't know how.
For his delight. He's playing for his delight. The whole existence. What is the verb of bear?
Yes, past tense of bear.
That's what it means.
Dally.
They're playing around. Playing around. Not serious. Serious.
But he doesn't, it's not all play, because he describes this world of strife and pain. That's
Full intense.
a full, that is
Yes.
the character of our life. It's not all just fun and games.
It's like the mother who whipped. No, when you're whipped, you know how painful that is. No?
But to the soul, somehow, something I think even within us, we go through this difficulties, sufferings, and all of that. But somehow there's something in us that still enjoys the life despite all the difficulties.
Because after that, there is something like the joy and sorrow, like it says there. Puts on joy and sorrow like a robe. So at times you are sorrowful, and then something changes, then you're joyful, and then again the whip comes. It's like the suffering, and then again the joy comes. And then it's an experience that is, it's like it strengthens us. No pain, no gain.
But then again, he refers to these subliminal depths. So this soul within us, which is maybe enjoying all this experience of joy and sorrow, it's deep within us. It's not just on the surface of our nature. I mean, on the surface, we really experience the pain and the suffering, in full measure. But deep within, in the subliminal consciousness, there that soul dwells. And there it lives in its own delight and can experience this outer happenings. Earlier, he had referred to that. It was on page 49. He was talking about this experience, these higher states of being that are available to us. But he says there on 49 at the break, but all is screened, subliminal, mystical. It needs the intuitive heart, the inward turn. It needs the power of a spiritual gaze. Else, to our waking mind's small moment look, a goalless voyage seems our dubious course. So until we really turn within and go deep into that subliminal consciousness into our soul, then all the experience, then we're just driven by nature and we are lashed with her whips and go through her joys. So we can continue on the next.
The absolute, the perfect, the alone, has gone out of the silence, his mood goes, where she lay in the featureless and formless hush, burnt from time by her immobile sleep, the ineffable prison of his solitude, the absolute, the perfect, the alone, has entered with his silence into space. He has fashioned these countless persons of oneself. He has built a million figures of his power. He lives in all who live in his vast alone. Space is himself and time is only he. The absolute, the perfect, the immaculate, one who is in us as our secret self, our mask of imperfection as sin. He has made this tenement of flesh of his bone, his image in the human measure cast. That is divine measure we might rise. Then the figure of divinity, the Maker shall recast us and impose a plan of Godhead on the waters moon, lifting our finite minds to its infinite, touching the moment with eternity.
Thank you. Here it's going back to that origin where the two are one. And he's showing us their identity with one another. The absolute, the perfect, the alone, has called out of the silence his mute force, where she lay in the featureless and formless hush. So even in that spirit, the soul oneness of the spirit, the conscious being, the absolute, that force was there, but quiescent, not moving. But still she's there. She's also one with him. She's guarding in that state from time by her immobile sleep the ineffable puissance of his solitude. There he's one. She's with him, silent and guarding from anything else, guarding his silence and solitude. But then, the absolute, the perfect, the alone, has entered with his silence into space. So now he moves. She moves into space and he's moving with her. He has fashioned these countless persons of oneself. He has built 1,000,000 figures of her power. He lives in all, who lived in his vast alone. So as nature expresses this multitude, he is also with her in that play. It's his power, ultimately.
Yeah, that here it said he has built 1,000,000 figures of his power.
Ultimately, it's his power. There are two who are one.
As if like a device and a battery.
Hmm?
As if like a device and a battery, they are integrated together into all. You said as if like a battery and a device integrated together.
And then he says, he changes it a little bit. The absolute, the perfect, the immune. The immune, he's not subject to all that suffering and pain, that soul within. He's entered into this, but somehow he is still immune from those difficulties. One who is in us as our secret self, our mask of imperfection has assumed. It's like a mask he's wearing, but within, he is immune. He has made the...
When one who's in us as our secret self is also immune.
Yes.
in us, so stepping back or
right.
The soul and this.
If we can step back into that, if we can enter into that, go deep within that subliminal consciousness, enter into the soul, we can also be immune. We can also be free of the difficulties of the nature. And he's assumed this mask of imperfection. He's come into this tenement of flesh, this kind of cheap housing, I think, tenement, I don't know, of flesh, of the body. That to his divine measure we might rise. That this house of flesh, this body, that it may rise up and unite again with his perfection. Then the Maker shall recast us and impose a plan of Godhead on the mortal's mold. Then he will come and transform us, create a new plan here, not one of suffering, difficulty, struggle, but one of perfection. Lifting our finite minds to his infinite and touching the moment, this time-bound life we live with eternity.
It's a big celebration when that happens.
Means supermaterialism. He must rise to, he's a tenement in our house, he's a human being, and he expects us to rise to supermaterialism. Rise to, that's what he's saying now.
Yeah.
For this flesh.
Life divine.
He's come in so that he's supporting that evolution, right? And he's traveling through that course of long evolution.
Yeah, enjoying the journey also.
Yeah. Joy, enjoying, and suffering both. So, continue.
This transfiguration is Earth's due to heaven. The mutual debt binds man to the Supreme. His nature he must put on as he put ours. We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion we must grow divine. Our life is a paradox with God for key. But meanwhile, all is a shadow cast by a dream. And the musing and immobile spirit, light in himself, donned the aspect of a myth. The burden of a long, unmeaning tale. For the key is hid and by the inconscient cat. The secret God beneath the threshold dwells. In a body obscuring the immortal spirit, a nameless resident, vesting unseen powers, with matter shapes and motives beyond the thought, and the haphazard of an unguessed consequence, an omnipotent, indiscernible influence, he sits unfed by the form in which he lives, and veils his knowledge by the groping mind.
Thank you. So now he looks at it from the opposite angle. He has become all this. He has entered into space. He has entered into us. Now we have to rise up to his level. We have to rise to the spirit. We must perfect the nature. This transfiguration is earth's due to heaven. This is mutual debt that binds man to the supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. His nature is a higher nature. Sometimes speak of the higher nature, the divine nature, and the lower nature, the ignorant nature of which we're part. His nature is the divine nature. Our nature is the lower nature. But we must put on his higher nature as he put on our lower nature.
There means quality by nature. Basically, he means qualities of divine. Nature, his qualities we must.
We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion we must grow divine. Our life is a paradox with God for key.
I love these lines very much, and especially that we are sons of God. Me as a woman, too, that I'm son of God. Yeah, that is also change deeply the whole consciousness. Yeah, and because the whole earth is full of she and a woman and man. It's really to transform myself and also what is outside. Challenge. And then, of course, I love very much our life is a paradox with God. Yeah, that is always when I'm irritated what is happening also. Then, yeah, that is a paradox for me. God is a key.
Yeah, he often kind of refers to this as an enigma, kind of a mystery. When we have lost that key, it seems like we're just wandering here kind of aimlessly without purpose. What is the reason for all this pain and suffering that we go through, or these joys, and what's the point of all of it? But that point is that transfiguration that we are moving towards, that we must achieve. That will bring kind of the justification, in a sense, for the long struggle.
Sometimes I'm wondering how man in a physical man body can understand how much we are declared as women, yeah? And then when the life is like this here, we are sons of God, to change this consciousness here.
Well, I don't know. I think he's still kind of, he's writing this in the 40s, perhaps, or earlier. And at that time, the masculine pronoun, was used to refer to both men and women. It was only in the last, 20, 30 years that we've become more conscious of these maybe bias in the language.
But Aurovillo was way, way ahead of his time. I don't think he used it in that way because it was during that time. You see, when he says we are sons of God, I think he
just means that the nature is she and the soul is he. It's just mankind is always referred to as man. It doesn't have to anyway. It's humanity as a whole.
That's what I'm saying. He's referring to humanity as a whole.
And when it says son, especially when mother says child, she refers to the soul. The soul is her child, the divine child.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. Till that time, he wrote, he was referred to all human beings, irrespective male or female. Only later on, when Traducer came in literature, he wanted to separate he with she, saying that both are equal, both should be put. But at that time, it was meant to be a common gender. Referring to the whole of humanity, all human beings.
Yeah, this I know, but I really count is the conscious transformation and change difficulty.
Yes.
And I think what you said, that is a solution that more and more to speak about the soul and
as a child.
that I the soul of the child and
It
everyone has a
says
soul.
supramental being is sexless, it's not male or female.
And I think the soul.
And that's why I said, because Sri Aurobindo Savitri is not meant for that time or this time. He was universal, eternal. And his time, when you see some of the words that he writes, he was way ahead in his consciousness. In some of the words that he used, I don't think they even used at that age or that time in the book. When I was reading for the first time, when during intense, whatever I went through. Which is why I'm saying he wrote it in a very gentle way, not because it was that time or this time.
Yes, you know,
Because future towards the
he was ahead of time, it was no difference to him, male or
yeah,
female.
because
But the literature at that time,
no, it's okay. No, it doesn't matter. Because sometimes it is good, and when you grumble, I think it's even more disturbing.
Now,
Yeah, it's a part of the discussion. I think even I like to be quietly at home, but I cannot grumble when people ask questions.
And maybe what you said was also because I remember when I was a child and were born, and from the villages you didn't told there living 30 people there, so they said you said we are living 30 souls there. That was how I grew up, and I think that later it changed all in this woman and female.
but what we get in these lines again is that until we find that key of God within, we are living in this kind of meaningless tale, as he puts it. A long, unmeaning tale. For the key is hid, and by the inconscient kept. Actually, we have to go deep, perhaps, to find that key, huh? Ultimately, it's kept by the inconscient in the darkness. It's hidden from us. It's not so easy to find the soul within. The secret God beneath the threshold dwells, in a body obscuring the immortal spirit. The body obscures it, that experience of the soul. It's an omnipotent, indiscernible influence. It's there within, but sitting unfelt by the form in which he lives. But it's an omnipotent force, an omnipotent influence. Ultimately, it moves the nature towards its intended destination. But here on the surface of life, we don't really know where it's going, what it's doing.
And what does vesting mean? Vesting unseen powers.
Vesting, holding, possessing, and veils his knowledge by the groping mind. Ultimately, to find that true knowledge, that groping mind has to fall silent. We could continue, would you?
A wanderer in a world his thoughts have made, he turns in a chiaroscuro of error and truth, to find a wisdom that on high is his, as one forgetting he searches for himself. As if he had lost an inner light he seeks, as a sojourner lingering amid alien scenes. He journeys to a home he knows no more, his own self's truth he seeks, who is the truth. He is the player who became the play. He is the thinker who became the thought. He is the many who was the silent one. In the simple figures of the cosmic force, and in her living and inanimate signs, and in her complex tracery of events, he explores the ceaseless miracle of himself. Till the thousandfold enigma has been solved in the single light of an all-witnessing soul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on the surface of life, we're like wanderers in a world our thoughts have made. He turns in a chiaroscuro of error and truth. This is a pictorial representation in terms of light and shade without color, kind of black and white or.
Can I read the word?
Yes.
Chiaroscuro, an Italian expression referring to a technique of presenting and accentuating by contrast of light and dark elements of a painting. In poetic uses, it often carries the literal sense of clearness and obscurity, with attendant psychological suggestions. Same. Light and darkness, obscurity and clearness, mixture of things.
Yeah, here he makes a, kind of between error and truth. So we turn between this error and truth, this mixture, to find a wisdom that on high is his. As one forgetting, he searches for himself.
In these three lines, it's maybe interesting to look at it, that there's a world, he's in it, and his thoughts have made the world. And then, but he, and then, but he needs a wisdom that on a on a higher level. That is in these three lines.
Yeah, this idea of a world his thoughts have made it's interesting because uh, towards the end also he refers to these symbol figures of the cosmic force and in her living and inanimate signs. Somehow all of this is created by consciousness, and but the consciousness is kind of filtered through the mind. And the mind comes in and creates, divides up the full light, let's say the wisdom that's on high, it divides it up into truth and error. It divides the one knowledge into a million different kinds of figures, mixtures of truth and error, of light and darkness. And then we're caught in that world that this mind has created. It's maybe more of a cosmic mind than our personal mind, but our personal mind also does this. We also sometimes, get a strong belief about certain things, and then that's the way it is for us. We create our own realities, in a sense, with our fixed ideas about the way things are. And then we live in that kind of world of mixture of truth and error. And we're searching in that. So the divine has entered into the world. He has come down through this filter of the mind into this world. And now he's become this. He's identified with this nature. He is the player who became the play, the thinker who became the thought. He is the many who was the silent one. It's the mind that divides the one reality into a million different figures. And yet all those million different figures of the one truth, they're reflections of that. Somehow they represent different aspects of that. And until we can kind of integrate all of those different perceptions, thoughts, that thousand-fold enigma can be solved. Shall we continue? Pramod, would you like to read?
This was his compact with his mighty will, for love of her and joined to her forever, to follow the course of time's eternity. Amid magic charms of her sudden moves, and surprises of her lost idea, and his city, his shipmates of her lost captors,
Two sea gulls wherever they want and gaze at each other over boundless time. Spirit and matter are their end and source, a seeker of hidden meanings in life's pulse, of the great mother's wide, uncharted way, and the new enigma of the terrestrial race. He is the explorer and the mariner on a sacred inner ocean without more. He is the adventurer and cosmologist of a magic or obscure geography.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So again, he has willingly joined with nature, made a compact, an agreement for the love of her, and joined to her forever, to follow the course of time's eternity. Wherever she goes, he goes. Amid magic dramas of her sudden moods and the surprises of her masked idea and the vicissitudes of her vast caprice.
That makes me laugh. Because, if you have experience of relations with women, sudden moods, vast caprice, it's there, no?
I mean, I think in another way, for me comes the picture how the continents on the earth are moving. And that is for me the biggest or the great mother, no? How the nature and how the glaciers are melting and all this, and how what this and the volcanoes and all this, and how this is a movement on the whole earth, and that also what is this? Is Indian plate puts under the European plate. So the Himalaya grows every year 1.23 centimeters higher, and this since long. So that is something which I on a much wider.
Physical nature has that same character of these shifting, changeable, fluid kind of character. And also, she brings sudden surprises sometimes. Volcanoes erupting and
Because it's an amazing power.
tsunamis coming, wiping out. And now we have all these changes in the physical nature coming, global warming, fires,
So here, two seems his goal. What he means two? Which two?
Well, he says spirit and matter
Yeah, afterwards he says that
are their end and source. Yeah, I was a little mystified by that too, but as if is matter one of the goals? In a sense, for the spirit, matter is a goal, I guess. Huh? Spirit comes into matter, into that absolute obscurity of form, loss of consciousness.
the other one is
And on the other side, he's coming up towards spirit, wanting to realize spirit. But we are also caught in the middle, and also we are kind of driven in both directions too. Again, we have this kind of interesting line, seeker of hidden meanings in life's forms. Again, there's a kind of idea here that all of these things that we see are kind of symbolic representations of hidden truths. Maybe certain aspects of the divine. I mean, we have books. You know, in a way they become physical symbols of knowledge. Or we have, powerful animals, horses, that are physical representations of vital force.
The monkey.
The monkey, what does he symbolize?
The mind.
Oh.
Monkey mind.
The changeable mind the restless mind that keeps moving. And through all these kinds of symbol forms, the soul is kind of trying to understand and read of these different things. What is the meaning behind these things? Trying to read all these signs and symbols. Ultimately, they're representing something of the self. Of the spirit. So he's exploring. And the explorer and mariner. So he's like the ship's captain.
What does it mean by born here?
Without born. Without boundary, limit, goal. He is the adventurer and cosmologist. Cosmologists study the universe, the nature of the universe.
Here it's last 3 lines. It's interesting, the secret inner ocean, and then how it's connected to the cosmologist and the Earth geography, the physical substance of creation.
Yeah, again, now he's in the next section, he's going to kind of take us through this kind of long metaphor of traveling in the ocean And again, it brings back this idea of these physical things being symbolic of a deeper reality. So here he's just kind of introducing the idea that, like, the soul is here kind of exploring an adventure in this world of symbols, symbolic life, trying to find the meaning, the goal.
I think goal is a harbor.
Without harbor?
Yeah, I think
Uh-huh.
so.
Well, I looked it up in.
Harbor. Same meaning, no? No boundary, no harbor. It's endless.
Yes.
Basically, sense is the same. Word meaning.
I looked in Merriam-Webster, so they say boundary, limit, goal were some of the different meanings.
There's a movie called Born Identity. I had never thought that it could mean ancient identity.
But that's its name, right?
It's the same thing. Sense is the same again. Yeah. The famous book that Born Identity.
And as he's moving through this now shifting flow of waters, he finds little stations where he can settle for a time, a place of firm land where he can stand. And that's like us, we try to, moving through life, life's always changing. Oh, here's something stable. I'll hang on to this for a while, this identity or this role or whatever it might be. We kind of can hold on to something because otherwise everything's always shifting, changing. But his paths are found for him by silent fate as stations in the age's weltering flood. Weltering is like this tossing of the waves, changing always. Rising and falling. Firm lands appear that tempt and stay a while. Then new horizons lure the mind's advance. But there comes no close to the finite's boundlessness. There is no last certitude in which thought can pause, and no terminus, no final goal or finishing point to the soul's experience. An unattained perfection calls to him from distant boundaries in the unseen. A long beginning only has been made. So I think we pause there for today.
But none learns whither through the unknown he sailed. or what secret mission the Great Mother gave in the hidden strength of her omnipotent will, driven by her breath across life's tossing deep, through thunder's roar and through the windless hush, through fog and mist, where nothing more is seen. He carries her sealed orders in his breast. Late will he know, opening the mystic script, whether to a blank port in the unseen he goes, or armed with her fiat to discover a new mind and body in the city of God, and enshrine the immortal in his glorious house, and make the finite one with infinity. A power is on him from her occult force that ties him to his own creation's fate. And never can the mighty traveler rest, and never can the mystic voyage cease, till the nascent dusk is lifted from man's soul, and the morns of God have overtaken his night.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.